Archer's voice by Mia Sheridan. I would personally classify this as a small town romance with a bit of suspense. You follow our main character Bree as she moves to this small town, and there is some drama. There's some criminal activity going on, and yeah, there are a lot of twists and turns. But at the heart of the story is the most adorable green flag book boyfriend, Archer. He's everything. I really do think that this is one of those books that's very popular for a good reason. I enjoyed my time reading it. Next, switching gears a little bit in a different genre, we have a cozy fantasy. This is Legends and Lattes. I really feel like this is the book that blew up on TikTok and made cozy fantasy a really popular genre last year. Both me and my fiance actually read this book and we both enjoyed it. It's very low stakes. It's just about this orc who decides that she's done doing orc shit and instead she wants to retire and open up a coffee shop. I'm someone that really likes cozy video games, and this book felt like I was reading a cozy video game, if that makes any sense. Not too much happens, but I would definitely recommend checking it out if you like cozy fantasy. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, a dark romance. This is Lights Out by Navessa Allen. Now, I'm someone that's very picky when it comes to dark romance. I do not like any romance books where the hero is abusive or does anything icky. But that being said, I don't mind when a romance has dark themes in it. I don't mind when we're talking about heavy topics. And I feel like Lights Out is a perfect middle ground. It didn't necessarily work for me, but I can see why so many people love this book. It's a dark stalker rom-com, but it's not stalking in a really creepy way. I don't know, I feel like you can get on board with it, if that makes sense. I will it's my favorite fantasy romance series ever. Alright, would this be a book talk video if we didn't have a Colleen Hoover book? I was torn between putting It Ends With Us or Ugly Love on this list. I feel like those are the two most popular on BookTok, but I decided to go with Ugly Love because I hate this book. If you know, you know. I did an entire drunk roast of this book in a previous video. The baby's big balls line, that line alone. This author owes me therapy, truly. You know who else needs therapy? The main characters of this book, I'll tell you that. Next, we have everyone's favorite incestual romance, Credence, by Penelope Douglas. This is about a girl who moves in with her step-cousins in the woods, and she kind of begins a romantic relationship with her uncle and her step-cousins. A lot of people on BookTok like to be like, it's not technically incest, but I think they're conveniently forgetting that two biological brothers have a three-way scene in this book. So, it is, babe. It is incest. There's another Penelope Douglas book on this list that I actually enjoy, but this just definitely was not for me. I think because I knew what I was expecting going in, it wasn't traumatizing. I don't think, Penelope Douglas owes me therapy, but definitely was not for me. I guess while we're here, let's talk about the other Penelope Douglas book, Punk 57, another OG TikTok book. This is one of the books that got me back into reading again as an adult. This was the first romance book that I read with explicit, smutty scenes in it, and my life was forever changed. I would say this is like dipping your toes into the dark romance genre. It's not very dark, but it is a bully romance, and it's one of the only bully romances that I really enjoyed. It's a new adult, so they're both seniors in high school, and they were pen pals for years, but then they stopped talking, they stopped being friends. If you like a spicy, silly, fun romance, and you haven't read Punk 57, I'd check that one out over Credence any day. There's also no weird age gap in Punk 57, which I appreciate. Okay, let's move on to everyone's favorite, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book took the world by storm, and I do think it is a little bit overhyped. I think the writing isn't as amazing as everyone makes it out to be. I will say I was let down by the second and third book in this series, but I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy the first book. I enjoyed Fourth Wing a lot. It was fun. I loved the new world. I loved meeting the characters. I don't think that the rest of the books in the series are as good, but I did enjoy my time reading this one. I'm gonna put it in hit or miss because I would recommend the first book, but I'm not sure if I would recommend the second or third. We'll have to see once the series is complete. Next, we have Flawless by Elsie Silver. For books and series that are really popular, I just decided to put the first book on the list. So, if you know me, you know I love my girl Elsie Silver. I love her books, and this is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. It is a small town Canadian romance series, and if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, definitely check it out. My favorite books are actually the second and the fourth book in the series, Artless and Reckless. Flawless was good, but it wasn't amazing. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I really love this series, but I don't think every book is like a 5-star, so I'm just gonna put it in the second tier, but I definitely recommend. Another popular romance series on BookTok is the Windy City series by Liz Tomford. This is the first book, Mile High. These are sports romances. They're spicy, they're a little bit long, but they're fun. I really enjoy them. Again, I don't if you found my 13-year-old diary. And not only is the writing just really juvenile and messy, the plot is all over the place. All over the place. This is like the LaCroix of young adult fantasies, and I truly don't get the hype. I feel like if you read this as a kid and you have an attachment to it, that's fine, but raise your standards because there are way better books out there. Next, we have Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This is such a polarizing series. I feel like this is one of those books where it's like you either love it or you hate it. And I sure as hell felt both of those emotions while reading this series. I don't like the Daisy Hates books. I find Jessa Hastings' usage of footnotes to be unbearable at times, so I've only read the Magnolia Parks books. And I think if you want to read about a toxic romance, a toxic, unhealthy romance about rich people in London, very Gossip Girl vibes, then I would pick it up. But I can also see that a lot of people probably wouldn't like it, so I think I'm gonna put it in hit or miss, hit or miss. I will say I really liked the second book in the series, Magnolia Parks, Long Way Home. That one I gave like 4 stars. Oh, next we have Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book took my heart out, threw it on the ground, stomped on it, spit on it, shit on it, and then put it back in my soul. I was an absolute wreck by the end of it. I'm not someone that has much experience with Greek mythology, so I only knew like bits and bobs of the original story, but I thought this retelling was absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend if you have not checked it out by now. Get your tissues, have them on deck. You'll need them. Next, we have The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This is like one of the first college like hockey romances that blew up on BookTok. I mean, I can see why people like it. It's one of those like, it's like a tutor, hockey player, tutor romance. He was definitely like a big player, and it's like a reformed player romance. So I can see the appeal of it, but such an interesting premise, and I thought the writing was very lyrical and very beautiful. I would say it's definitely more of like a fantasy romance, and I wish it was a fantasy. If I'm honest, I wish it spent less time focused on the romance and more time on like the plot and the world building. I didn't personally like click with this story. I wasn't very connected to it, but I also read this with my book club, and a lot of people in the book club enjoyed it. So even though I didn't necessarily love it, I'd probably still recommend it. I'd still recommend it. I think it was well written. This next book, I think I have a very hot take, a very controversial opinion. This is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, I am a fan of Taylor Jenkins Reid. I like her books. I have really enjoyed some of her other books. I liked Daisy Jones and the Six. I liked Malibu Rising. I liked One True Loves. But I did not like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I thought that the ending of this book was offensive. I'm not gonna spoil anything, obviously, no spoilers in this video, but like if you know, you know. I just don't personally like the way that queerness and race were handled in this book. I don't know, it felt weird reading a book written by a seemingly straight white author and then having like all of the big plot twists in your book be about race or sexuality. It didn't sit right with me. I didn't like it. Okay, next we have BookTok's most beloved thriller. This is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I feel like this is the book that like put Frida McFadden on the map, like shot her into the stratosphere, and now her books are everywhere. I've read like 4 or 5 of them, and I will say this is one of the better ones that I did read, but it was still very, very, very average. I feel like Frida McFadden's writing is just so basic and surface level, and her characters are very cardboard. They don't really have much depth to them, and I just don't remember being that thrilled when I was reading this. I just think there are way better thrillers out there and way better thriller authors. I think if you're new to the thriller genre, you might enjoy Frida McFadden. I think she might be a good way to like dip your toes in and get started, but if you read a lot of thrillers, definitely skip out on The Housemaid. Alright, we made it to our last couple of books. Next, I mean, would it be a book talk video if we didn't talk about Haunting Adeline? Probably the most popular book talk dark romance. It is a stalker romance between Zaid and Adeline. This is another dark romance where we kind of romanticize sexual assault. For some reason, our love interest is like a vigilante who's like trying to stop these trafficking rings, but simultaneously has no problem assaulting his love interest, and he somehow thinks that like he's a good guy. It's not good. Okay, I'm just gonna say it point blank. It is not good. The writing is bad. A lot of the characters have weird racial stereotypes that are just uncomfortable to read, and if I'm honest, I don't think H.D. Carlton did a single ounce of research into what trafficking actually looks like. Save the money for my therapy bills and use it to hire an editor. Another author who would benefit from editing, Lauren Asher with The Fine Print. I read all 3 books in this series, The Dreamland Billionaires, and if you like billionaire romance, then you might enjoy this, but I hated this series. I could not get behind any of the couples. All of the men were insufferable. I just don't think that there's anything romantic about watching women having to teach grown men how to treat people with kindness and respect. I will say that The Fine Print taught me that billionaire romance is not for me. So, at least by saying that it is spicy, but I loved it. I gobbled it up. I feel like this book has very like hit or miss reviews. You either love it or you hate it, but I thought it was fun. I thought it was silly. I thought it was hot. I thought it was steamy. I liked that both of our main characters felt like fleshed out real people with real problems, and you get this amazing like found family in this book that I really enjoy. If you want a good spicy, smutty hockey romance, then I would recommend. Next, we have one of my favorite books of all time, Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is a lit fic about two people, Connell and Marianne, who meet in school, and you kind of just follow them throughout their lives as they kind of dip in and out of each other's lives. I feel like Sally Rooney writes such realistic and relatable characters. I feel like she does such a great job at embodying the human experience in her books. I always find something that I relate to or something that makes me feel seen, and I really appreciate that. Her books are very character based and character driven, so if you don't connect to the characters, you probably won't like the book. But I loved it. I loved Connell, I loved Marianne, and it's fantastic. Also, the TV adaptation is amazing. I would also recommend the TV adaptation. Next, we have Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation. I didn't know which Emily Henry I wanted to put on this list because I feel like all of her books are BookTok sensations, and for good reason. I decided to go with People We Meet on Vacation because it is actually the first Emily Henry book that I gave 5 stars, and I think it was her first contemporary romance as well, if I'm not mistaken. I was swooning for this book. I loved it. I think Emily Henry is the queen of a summer romance. If Emily Henry has one fan, it's me. If Emily Henry has 0 fans, I am dead. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have this selection by Kiera Cass. This is a young adult, and it's basically like if The Bachelor was set in a dystopian setting. Similar to Shatter Me, I feel like most of the hype behind this series is driven by nostalgia and not necessarily by the quality of the books. I read them for the first time as an adult. I was in my 20s, and I didn't really connect with them as much as I probably could have if I read it when I was younger. But again, there are other young adult books that I read and I love that I really connect to even in my 20s, so I just don't think that this is one of